Hey folks, it's Sam. I'm live today on Tuesday, August 27th at a little after 10 a.m. Pacific time, speaking about the crazy Mars shift that just started. 9.5 months of intensity. What it means for you, the world, the USA. I'm going to be going over this shift generally here today on the class. You see, we have the chart here. We're going to be looking at how Mars is going back and forth in these signs over the next 9.5 months. So get this overview today. And I'm going to be talking about Mars, the sign of Cancer, the sign of Gemini, and what this means for us all.
Hey folks, I'm doing a special web class on this crazy Mars shift that's coming up. It's actually 9.5 months of intensity that's going to happen from August 26th until June of next year. We're not used to seeing Mars in a sign for that long. And again, it's incredibly rare, and Mars is going to toggle back and forth between the sign of Gemini and the sign of Cancer. Wherever those signs fall for you, those houses are going to be incredibly important. So for example, as a Gemini, it's my first and second house. If you're Scorpio, it's 9th and 10th houses. But again, I'm going to be taking a deep dive. There's also incredibly transformative things happening in the world. We have a big election in 2024 in the USA, global events in the Middle East, all over the place. So this is going to implicate all of us, whether you know it or not. This is going to be a major factor in your life over the next several months into next year. So learn about it for free. Check it out.
So yeah, that's the web class that I'm doing. You can register for that. And you really want to find out how these things are going to be affecting you over the next 9.5 months. And as you see, I have the exact dates down here at the bottom. As it says here, it says Mars direct motion in Gemini. So Mars just went into Gemini, which is sort of exacerbating things like our capacity for arguing and getting frustrated, and we're ready to go to battle over ideas, you think, as we're in this political season and whatnot. So this just shifted. Mars had been in Taurus with Jupiter. He just moved into Gemini, and he's in Gemini from August 26th until October 20th, right? So that's about a 2-month shift. Then he goes into Cancer October 21st until December 5th, moving forward. That's his direct motion. So that's another month and a half. Then Mars goes retrograde in Cancer. And of course, in the sign of Cancer, he's in his debilitated sign. And he goes retrograde on December 6th until January 19th, when he goes retrograde back into Gemini. So again, that would be Cancer from October 21st to January 19th. Then he's retrograde in Gemini from January 20th until February 23rd. That's when he moves forward. But then he's in Gemini until April 2nd. So again, from January 20th to April 2nd, Mars will be back. He'll be back in Gemini, retrograde and direct. Then his final move through Cancer will be April 3rd till June 6th of next year. That's another 2 months. So you can see for about the next, 9.5 months, Mars is going to go back and forth in between these two signs, spending, about 4 months in each one. So, being forward and retrograde. So again, this doesn't happen that often. I mean, it may have happened in our lifetime before. It's not unusual that Mars will hang out in between two signs. Sometimes he'll be in just one sign for like 6 months when he does his retrograde motion. And sometimes he'll also hang out in two signs. So where he's usually in a sign for a couple months, then he goes to the next sign for a couple months and keeps going. To have him in two signs for like twice as long and going back and forth, again, it's really going to be highlighting this aspect of all of our lives collectively, which is the Mars in Gemini, Mars in Cancer. He'll be doing that sort of generally for all of us. But then for each person, it's totally different. Like if you're a Pisces person, Mars goes into Gemini, which is your 4th house. So it's that Mars in Gemini, like, mental, frustration and but it's in the 4th house, which is your emotional state, maybe your home. Then he goes into the 5th house, which would be creativity. Then he goes back into the 4th house, then back into the 5th house. So for each of the 12 ascendants, it means something different. That's what I'm talking about when I'm describing the web class that I'm doing. I'm going to break that down for each of the 12 signs and then go into greater depth about all of the indicators, really go in enormous detail about Mars and how his qualities are supported or detracted in Gemini and Cancer. But today I'm going to talk about it again, like in a deep overview. And of course, Mars is that planet, that warrior spirit, and it gives us the principles that are worth fighting for. So this is why with Mars, it's always about, you have to choose your battles wisely, because life is a battle. Whether we want to think about it that way or not, oh, I'd rather be peaceful. You'd rather be peaceful for a while. And then if you're just going to be peaceful and people run over you, eventually you're going to fight. And it doesn't mean you have to kill or destroy, or that the fighting even needs to be that unpleasant. Once you learn the art of war, you learn what's worth fighting for. And again, this is a big part of the Mars lesson in life, is what's worth fighting for, right? Because it's very easy to swing at every windmill, to swing at every person who wants to argue with you or fight with you. There's no shortage of people that want to argue with you, that think because you have a view, then they get to argue and now you have to defend yourself, or whatever it might be. On some level, there's some of that. But then just things that generally make you mad, you feel like you have to avenge them. Again, we have to choose our battles wisely, because there are definitely things worth avenging. What's worth fighting for? Because our energy gets depleted in the struggle, but it might be worth it. For a time, we have to get out there and do it and then recover, right? So you can see Mars as the indicator, the karaka of things like that, like even things like working out, or, as I talk about, I love to play tennis. So you get out there and it feels so good. You're really playing against yourself on some level. You have an opponent, but the opponent is like a challenger. And if you're a good sportsman and you really enjoy sports and you love it for what it is, then you love your competitors because they bring out the best in you, because they challenge you, even if you lose. Or even if you win, you respect the fight. You respect how they hung in there and how much courage they showed and how much mental toughness they've showed, how tough they are to get in there and fight. Even though they're going to lose, they didn't give up and they made it hard on you, for example, right? So these are Mars virtues. And we can see the Mars virtues as being displayed with that exaltation point in Capricorn, right? Where we don't give up. This is why Mars has this exaltation point in Capricorn, because it's where we're in the fight and we're not just going to give up because it's too hard. We're not going to give up just because we've had a couple of setbacks. We're not going to just be mentally defeated. We're going to hang in there, and as long as I got life in me, I got fight in me, right? That's what makes Mars powerful. Now, of course, it's also, Capricorn's very practical. It's one who conserves energy. Like the thing I just said, if we fight every battle that comes along, then we're just going to be depleted and we're going to be weak, because it's a sign of weakness. This is why Mars has its debilitation point in the sign of Cancer, where we're very emotional about the fights. We get very emotional about the fighting, and we may wind up hating our competitors rather than appreciating that hard, how much tenacity they have and how they made us stronger by their perseverance. Because if the victory is easy, then we don't test our mettle. So when Mars is in the sign of Cancer, which is one of the signs he's going to be in, then we then we lose that appreciation for learning from our losses, again, which is the other virtue of Mars in Capricorn is we've learned with Mars in Capricorn, we learn how to be strategic and not just fight every battle, because Capricorn is where we also feel the mistakes and we suffer for our losses in Capricorn. So Mars is like, okay, I remember, I don't want to feel that suffering again. So I'm going to learn to be a better warrior. When Mars is in Cancer, for example, and this isn't just about your natal chart. This is when Mars is weak in general. A weak Mars in general has an aversion, or he's too emotional about the battles. When Mars is weak, this is one of the things that we can know for sure, is that Mars is too emotional about all the battles. And when we're emotional about battles, like I can give the example of like playing tennis. Some of my best, I recently, even like last week, I played a couple guys that usually beat me. And look, I'm 61 now, right? But I get out there, like I played a guy who's 27 years old. He's like the second best one in this league that I'm in, which is good players. I've never beaten him, but I've gotten close before. And man, it was so close. I mean, I could have beaten, you could say I should have won, but I was down like the whole time. I was fighting back the whole time. And it's like, even though I lost, I was like, man, mainly because I didn't get emotionally crushed. Like as soon as he started to get on a roll, like he came out and he was ahead like 3-0 in the first set. It's very easy to mentally and emotionally kind of collapse. Like, here we go, I'm going to lose. He's so fast and blah, blah, because he's a little faster. But I'm like, no, just play your game. Don't get defeated. Like, I know what to do. I just need to execute. And I just got cold. Like inside, I was like, I didn't get emotional about it. And then I won like 4 games in a row. So then I'm ahead 4-3. Then he wins 3 games in a row. Or no, he wins 2 games in a row. Then I win 2 games in a row. Like it was just back and forth. We were both just, it was like, like 2 guys, sort of fighting or whatever. But again, even though I lost the match, I felt great about the fight, right? And I respect him so much because I could have crushed him. There were points when I was hurting him. And it's mentally and emotionally hard when you're losing. It's not just physical. Somebody finds a way and they bust you up a little bit. And then mentally and emotionally, you get kind of crushed. And then you have to figure something out. You have to not get emotionally crushed. And then you have to physically get in there and do something different. So again, this is really what Mars is. I use the tennis metaphor because it is a good one in that context. And so again, when we're too emotional about the battles, then we just cave. We just sort of emotionally collapse. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why, even though I'm older, I wind up winning a lot of matches because I never give up. Like I have a real strong perseverance. So even if it looks like I'm going to lose, you have to beat the life out of me. I'm not going to be emotionally defeated, even if I'm losing. So again, and a lot of people, I'm not saying it's about me, but a lot of people, once you get in their head and you frustrate them, they're out of the game. And so the thing I just talked about, frustration, is a big symbol of this Mars, why Mars is debilitated in Cancer. And I'll be talking more about that in a second. Please like the video. Clicking like helps a lot more than you know. It pushes the video higher in relevant video searches. Also, please leave a nice comment. Comments also help more than you know as it raises the video in searches. Many times with hundreds of likes, there are only a dozen comments and they can be disproportionately negative. So be positive. Let me know if you like this. Even just a few words really helps. So subscribe, ring the bell to get notified of upcoming videos. Yes, please do that. I need to take a little drink. So rather than just drink, I run that. But yeah, please do like, subscribe, and share this with others if you think this is valuable. I spent quite a bit of time putting these things together with the graphics and whatnot, so appreciate that. But so again, that's the nature of Mars. And again, you can see one of the signs that he's going to be in is Cancer, that debilitated sign where we're too emotional about the battles and not strategic enough. But even in the sign of Gemini, which is where he's going to be, where he is now, as I'm recording this, until October 20th, and then again, January 20th next year until April. So again, big chunks of time. Mars is not that powerful, right? Because again, Gemini is very intellectual. It's about ideas. Mars is about literally about fighting, about the strength to fight, the courage to fight, and the love of fighting. I use a tennis metaphor. I love getting out there, even if I lose. I love getting out there, that fight, that battle, right? That's why people like working out. You like feeling that challenge, right? And so we all have some part of that in our life, and it's better if it's something physical, because that's what Mars is really trying to do, put those things into action. Again, the highest aspect of this is yoga and disciplined actions where we're doing spiritual practice, because it's hard to do it. I'm doing these readings, overcoming obstacles, readings where I analyze the difficult planets, Mars, Saturn, and the nodes. They're the ones that give us the power to do things that are hard. And when we can do those things that are hard, we overcome our weaknesses. And again, Mars is that thing that likes overcoming obstacles. And again, because it's a certain amount of suffering involved. So again, he's very much about these actions, not these ideas, which is Gemini, and not all these emotions, how I feel about it all, how I feel about doing yoga, how I feel about getting my rear end up out of the bed at 5 a.m. to do meditation. Well, how do I feel about all that? Well, I don't feel good about it. I don't like it. No one likes it. I don't feel good about it, but I'm not doing it because I want to feel good. Cancer. I'm doing it because I know it's the thing that's going to make me strong. Saturn or Capricorn, right? But again, with Gemini, it's kind of similar. Well, what do I think about all of that? Well, I think I could sleep a little longer. I think I could do that. Well, I can rationalize. Well, is it really? Do I really need to do that? I mean, there's this, there's that. I want to enjoy it. You can't just be doing things that are hard all the time. You got to enjoy. This is Gemini ideas, rationalizations, because this is the negative part of Gemini where we can really rationalize anything. We can tell ourselves any story, and we do all the time. We tell ourselves stories all the time to rationalize what we want to do anyway. And we tend to think that we're thinking and using our discrimination when we hardly ever use our discrimination. We hardly ever think intelligently about what to do and then do it. Thinking intelligently after we learn and understand, oh yeah, I made this mistake, I did this. That's actually the Gemini Mercury virtue. But we're hardly ever doing that. We're not really thinking about what's right or thinking about the mistakes we made and where we need to make corrections and we need to make adjustments. Now we do that with other things, like let's say we're writing out a document, we go back and we spell check, we fact check, all of that. And we're not personal about it. We're like, okay, I spelled this word wrong. I'm going to change it. It's not personal, right? That's Mercury and Gemini, this kind of editing, this very neutral approach to just seeing what's true and what's real and what the situation is, and then just sort of doing it, right? Making the correction. Again, with Mars has an opinion, and he's trying. And in Gemini, it can be this opinion, this, instead of these ideas. And again, I just did a course over the weekend where I talked about each one of the planets, and one of the biggest confusion between two planets is Mars and Mercury, because Mars looks a lot like Mercury in the moment, because most of the time we're not doing what we know is right. We're arguing about it, which is Mars. And it sounds, well, this is Mercury because I'm talking. Yeah, you're talking, but you're not. But Mercury isn't the one who is speaking through the channel. Mars is. And instead of it being curious and interested and listening and trying to put the details in place and explain something clearly, which is what Mercury would do, Mercury's not trying to win. Like in my tennis match, we're not batting the ball back and forth to just have fun and see what it would be like. When we're playing tennis, we're trying to win the point. And by the way, I will tell you, as a person with a lot of Gemini, one of my problems when I play tennis is, and I have to tell myself this all the time, stop playing around, Sam, and try and go win the point. Because I'll be in the middle of a point, I'm trying to win a match, and instead, in my head, I'm like, oh, let me try this shot. And I'm trying shots instead of winning points. And it frustrates me about myself. But because I have a lot of Gemini energy, I feel like playing sometimes instead of winning. So this is what us players do sometimes too. We just get together to just work on our game. Work on our game means let's get together and play, but then also it's a time where we can try shots. But trying shots is different than winning matches where you want to win the point. This is Mars. Mars wants to win, not try and play around, right? So good communication is actually not trying to win. What are you trying to win when you're communicating? There is not going to, even if you win, you've lost something because you've done it at the expense of the other person's ideas. Even if your ideas are smarter or better, you don't need to insult the other, or the point shouldn't be to prove that. If you're trying to prove you're smarter, prove you're better, blah, 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 then there's too much Mars, or there's too much ego in the ideas. And that's not actually what Mercury is. That's not the Mercury channel. Mercury isn't the smart ass trying to prove everybody else is wrong. He sees where everybody has, like, I might know this thing really well, but you know something else really well, and it's all good. I can hear that. And I'm not going to try to pretend that I know something I don't know. There's no embarrassment in not knowing everything, etc. This is Mercury and Gemini energy, especially. Gemini especially is that type of energy. Like you might say, well, Sam, you certainly get on here and sound like you think you know everything. Well, I do know the things I'm saying. These are the things I know, and I'm sharing them. But you don't hear me talking about things I don't know. At least I don't think. Sometimes people think that, but I think relative to what I know, I'm just trying to explain it. I spend more time explaining simple things than I do trying to get into very complicated things. Spending a long time thoroughly explaining something simple, for example, is a great Mercury and Gemini virtue. By the way, this is one of the things I'm always getting my students to try to understand. Learn something really, really well. Explaining simple things with enormous detail is much better than barely explaining 50 things that you don't really comprehend as well, for example. Again, I'm talking about this because Mars in Gemini has that tendency, because Mars wants to get to the goal really quick. And in Gemini, it's, okay, which idea is right? This one or that one? Okay, this is right. Now I'm going to argue about it, because Mars wants to win and Gemini does not want to win. So we need to be very careful with this sort of competitive communication when Mars goes through Gemini in all of these shifts, and then emotional type of battles and struggles, being too emotional about the battle and struggle when Mars goes into Cancer based on these times that you have. And of course, in the midst of all these shifts as well, we're going to be having eclipses, other things going on. But this is going to really influence and affect 2 houses in your chart. Regardless of what your ascendant is and whether you know it or not, this is going to be sort of enveloping a lot of our life back and forth for the next 9.5 months. And again, this we have elections coming up, a lot of things in the world coming up, and that's what I'm doing in this web class. I'm going to be going into these things in much greater detail, examining each one of these back and forth, motions, all of these different shifts, and you can register and check that out. But again, certainly, I mean, it's free, but for you to know, again, like if you're Taurus, it's going to be affecting your 2nd and 3rd houses. And this is one of the very important principles. Again, these 2 houses, one after the next, is very important. It's not just, oh, there's this one, and there's that one. These 2 segregated parts that have nothing to do with each other. No, there's a process between 2 houses. The 2nd house is the entry point of the 3rd house. The 3rd house begins where the 2nd house ends. 2nd house is like the things we're comfortable with. You could look at it as like the family you were born in, right? That sort of comfort zone that you were born into. But then the 3rd house is your unique interests and ideas and friends in the middle of all of that. You're not just a carbon copy of everything that is trying to mold you when you were a child or even now. So second house establishes a certain value structure at any given time. But then the third house is where we're exploring new interests beyond that, for example. So these two are related. Values and interests that come from, values that create interest. Then we reflect on the interest and say, do they support my values? Then we go back and forth here. But that's like for Taurus. Again, if you're like Sagittarius, it's 7th and 8th houses. Okay, that's other people. I want to accommodate them. I want to compromise and have an agreement, but then I feel vulnerable. 7th and 8th house, right? If you're Scorpio, 9th and 10th house, or I'm sorry, 8th and 9th house, right? Where it's I feel vulnerable and I'm not sure what to do, but then I look for optimism and purpose in the 9th house. So toggling back and forth between these two areas of life has already started, and you're starting the first one now in Gemini. And then you see it's going to October 21st to December 5th. He'll be going forward in Cancer in the emotional one. Then he turns retrograde in the emotional sign, goes back into Gemini January. Then he goes forward again in Gemini again. So it's back and forth on these two life lessons, whatever they are. So if you want to hear that in greater detail, also check out the web class.
Hey folks, I'm doing a special web class on this crazy Mars shift that's coming up. It's actually 9.5 months of intensity that's going to happen from August 26th until June of next year. We're not used to seeing Mars in a sign for that long. And again, it's incredibly rare, and Mars is going to toggle back and forth between the sign of Gemini and the sign of Cancer.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel.